Thanks, Mr. Tolchin. Thanks to you, Mr. Hamilton, and thanks to everybody here at the Woodrow Wilson Center for co-sponsoring and hosting these panel discussions today on what is indeed a very important subject. We at the Association of the United States Army are pleased to be a co-host with you, and I personally am delighted to be here with you. The hearing today, of course, on the Hill will be critical to all of us, and we all look forward to getting the report off of the Hill from the Secretary of Defense, who is at the heart, really, of the transformation effort now of the armed forces. Now, while I'm going to speak primarily, I suppose, as an Army officer representing the association, much of what I say will have a much broader context. Transformation, easy to say, tough to do. It's easy to talk about all kinds of ideas. All ideas are not necessarily workable ideas. It's hard to make the transition from theory to practice. Obviously, to make the shift, you have to have a very clear vision of what's next and a comprehension of the difficulties that you will encounter as you move, and you need to make sure that you don't leave people behind, people who have ideas and people who have the ability to take your ideas and do something with them. Michael Howard, Sir Michael Howard, an eminent British historian in 1973, when he accepted the Chesney Prize in London for military thinking, said, you can rest assured whatever doctrine you are working on in peacetime, you probably have it wrong. What counts, he said, is making sure that you're not so wrong that you can't get it right when the time comes. I think those words are critical to our subject today. We can't be so wrong in our transformation efforts and our doctrinal underpinnings, our conceptual underpinnings, and how professionals and how people who think about the subject feel about the application of your assets, that when the time comes to apply your assets, whatever those assets may be, and we're talking today about national military strategy, national military power, not all the elements of national power, so that we can apply those assets properly when the time comes. We must be close so that the institutions, whether that institution be the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, or in the case of conflict, the Coast Guard, so that we can make minor adjustments when the real test comes and get it right. Now, I would argue that the United States Army has been in a transformation mode really since 1775. And if you get into the inside of the United States Army, and I don't intend to do that, you would find that learned professionals have been arguing about the size of the infantry squad all the way from Concord and Lexington to the present moment. So some of this is not new, and we have been doing it a long time. In the last century, really, we transformed ourselves during World War I. As most of the military professionals in the room know, the artillery was, in fact, designed on the French system. The British had a real influence on us in World War I. And some of those systems still apply to this point. Probably the major transformation of the U.S. Army in the last century was conducted by George Marshall prior to World War II in what he called the Louisiana maneuvers. He fell the Army out down in Louisiana and the Carolinas, and there are some people in this room, I expect, who participated in some of those exercises, and he experimented. He experimented with the Army to see how the Army of his time was put together, and then he made some adjustments. He and General McNair made some major adjustments. We tried it, we experimented during the 50s with battle groups, 50s and early 60s with battle groups in the Potomac Division. We did it prior to Vietnam. and I know there are some people in the room who participated in these exercises down at Fort Benning with using concepts developed by General Hamilton House. The House Board, Air Mobility Air Assault became the 11th Air Assault Division and then the 1st Cavalry Division. Some of what those gents, by the way, did is now taken as, okay, that's the way you do it, with helicopters and air mobility. I would tell you, though, that everybody, even to this moment, in the United States Army is not necessarily completely signed up on some of that, and some of those concepts are still evolving. A doctrinal, tactical, materiel training force structure revolution, as important as the Marine and in many cases the Army involvement with amphibious warfare, took a lot of time, and everything that happened was not universally accepted at the time, and some of the learning was proved that this is not going to work, so we'll try it again. And we kept trying it. After Vietnam, the Asta Rita report, the some of Harry Summers' work, some of the other conceptual work that was done set the strategic stage for and rationale for what the United States Army did in Central Europe with equipment acquisition and the doctrinal developments. Now, General Shinseki has articulated a concept for the objective force. That is a force which is able to fight across the entire spectrum of conflict, all the way from people throwing rocks to high-end nuclear engagement. And by the way, this is not theory we're talking about. Here a couple of months ago, I read an article on the front page of the New York Times, 1,500 words, and it articulated in 1,500 words, it talked about, the reporter talked about conflict involving Israel and the PLO and surrounding nations, and he talked about the use of nuclear weapons, missiles, and he went from nuclear weapons to conventional war to people throwing rocks in 1,500 words. The world as it is, not as the world as some would like it to be. And the real task is to transform ourselves in a way which enables the young people who are out there doing it to accomplish their tasks and not drop the ball. Because if we know one thing about the American people, it is that they expect success. And they don't expect military professionals or civilians who are in responsible positions to be standing around arguing about, well, we didn't get this, we didn't get that, and how come you didn't support us with this? They expect success. That, I think, is the real challenge, all the way back to Sir Michael Howard. Now the international situation and the world in which we live today, I think, has demonstrated, obviously, that we have multiple centers of power. You certainly could see it just reading superficially the President's most recent trip to Europe, even where he went. Even the places that he went are manifestations of that fact. Multiple potential threats across a wide array of capabilities. We see it. We see it in the Middle East being played out almost every day. Enemies can buy specific capabilities that they can use against small, high-value targets. Asymmetric warfare, theoreticians talk about asymmetric warfare. I would offer you this thought. Mr. Milosevic had as his target the Albanian people. Interestingly enough, he turned his target into a weapon against NATO. In General Clark's most recent book, you will note that General Clark even admitted that one day he woke up with hundreds of thousands of Albanian refugees on his hands, and he didn't know what to do with them. Sounds like asymmetric warfare to me. It's not a theory. It's a reality. And people, our adversaries, get a vote. And they can modernize in ways that we might think are inappropriate, but they can optimize their own talents. The United